Welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blain. I interview leaders, experts and business professionals from around the world who are bringing leadership principles and know-how into the digitally driven 21st century workplace, with focus firmly on the how-to rather than the what. Each episode is in aid of a charity chosen by my guests, and since 2020, we've made donations to over 80 global and local causes. Welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast with my guest John Krotec, a US Army veteran, visionary entrepreneur, and founder of the NeoMasculinity Solutions movement, a global organisation helping men and women reclaim purpose, live through truth, and lead with clarity. After surviving a brain injury and confronting long-buried trauma, John transformed adversity into a mission through creative healing, founding the Brainary, and writing the Sentinel Handbook, a practical tool for self-leadership. Today, he delivers riveting keynotes and workshops on leadership, critical thinking, emotional resilience, self-agency, and more. His message is bold. Truth must be protected, clarity cultivated, and leadership reclaimed as a responsibility, not just a title. With over 40 years in business, John's journey spans high-altitude expeditions in the Andes, building a pre-internet multi-million-dollar retail company, and hosting influential conversations with leaders like General Flynn and Ron DeSantis. We go right to the beginning and open up an unflinching discussion about John's challenging past, how he came through that, built businesses, supported others, going through the same journey as him, and how his neo-masculinity movement counters the toxic machismo being given air online and in our communities. This episode is in aid of the Brain Injury Association of America as a thank you to John for joining us, and in recognition of those like him who are dealing with brain trauma or who are recovering. John, thank you very much for joining me. Please introduce yourself, your passion as a leader and as a family man.
Hey, Jeremy, it's great to be here, and I'm very humbled to be here and be able to share my story with you on your show. That's really cool. My name is John T. Krotec, and I am what you might say an authentic human outlier. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I'm an entrepreneur. I also write a lot of poetry, and there's a reason for that. And I'm working on programs that actually make the human organism or the human condition better. Our hopes are to raise the global vibration, and not just in a cliche way. You know, we hear it all the time. We're going to change the world. We really mean it. And I got a crack team of people around me, men and women, who are helping us along with these initiatives. So I know that was long-winded, and it was probably a bit of Java in there, you know, the cold blacks or the hot black stuff that makes me talk so much, but I'm glad to be here.
Great. Well, very happy to host you today, John. And I like that terminology, an authentic human outlier. Where did you come up with that one? Tell me a bit more.
Well, you know, authenticity, I believe, I think is the basis of everything in life. Authentic people bring great value. And unfortunately, and that we hope it's changing, but unfortunately, you run into very few authentic people like you and people like me, and we're the outliers. Human beings are social animals by biology and by nature. And recently, they're trying to make digital constructs out of us and our relationship. So even though we're on the outside, we're moving very hard to be on the inside and to let people know that they can be authentic. So authentic, human, and an outlier soon to be on the inside. So if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And I'm probably going to surprise a lot of those tuning in today by going to go back into your past a little bit and to understand you. And I know you a little bit, John, you know, the authenticity, your passion behind what you do, your passion for helping other people. But you've had a lot to deal with, and your recovery from brain trauma, surviving child sexual abuse, their experiences few could endure, let alone transform themselves in a more positive way and for the good of others as well. If you wouldn't mind, could you walk us through the mental and emotional sort of pivot or turning points during your trauma and following your recovery?
Yes, sir. Thanks for the question. let me just say this as a precursor. I am truly blessed. I'll just leave it at that. I didn't think I was blessed at the time when some of these things happened, but now looking back on it decades later, I'm truly blessed. I was born into a family of four. My grandparents were immigrants from my dad's side from Yugoslavia, Croatia, and on my mom's side, way, way back, they came over in the 1820s from Ireland. So I was raised um, in a loving household and two older sisters, younger brother, my army brat. I was born in Germany at an army base. My dad was a young officer over there and was raised with a lot of really great values of family. Family was everything to our family and patriotism. We can talk a little bit about that, a great love of country and hardworking people were in my past. I'm not a blue blood by any stretch of the imagination. And a firm spiritual foundation. We won't get into religion and all that, but I had a belief in something greater than me. So right about the third grade, I was a Cub Scout, Boy Scout, a wrestler in middle school and in high school. But right about the summer between the third and the fourth grade, things changed. And I was without going into vivid detail, but I'll just leave it at this. When you can smell the devil's breath, you know you're being screwed. I'll just leave it at that. And it happened to me one time. It was abuse, but it was also a separation of my soul from my physical being, and also questions of masculinity and questions of God and questions of how could the universe, I didn't call it that at the time, but how could it allow that to happen? And so I went from an inquisitive, curious, young Cub Scout, spunky and full of life, to a great white shark kind of person, devoid of life in my eyes. And nobody spotted this. But I had an innate feeling, Jeremy, that if I said something to somebody, that somehow what happened would have been my fault. But also, I would have been the guy that people are whispering about. And I didn't want to be that guy. So I I ditched it. I hid that moment deep in my psyche. But it manifested itself later on with abuse of alcohol and living life on the edge, motorcycles and high risk behavior and telling young girls that you love them just to prove your manhood. We won't go into that. And it really made me feel it wasn't me. The things that I were doing wasn't me. It was just a way to deal with the pain. But anyhow, I went about my business very successful, hard charger, and just about everything I touched, but I always found a way to sabotage it somehow. So fast forward, 40 years, successful in business. My wife and I ran a small business, 23 years, 22 of them. We were very successful. Only 1 year did we not make money. But she was she had left to go visit her mother in another state. And a buddy of mine said, "Hey, let's go out and let's have a good time." And I did. We went out, we had a good time. We were drinking glasses of wine, 6 to 8 ounces, and got in my vehicle, which I shouldn't have done. And I was involved in an accident that gifted me with a traumatic brain injury. Thank God I didn't hurt anybody. But this traumatic brain injury was the beginning of a journey that forced me to come to grips with the demons that had haunted me for so long. And almost immediately, I started to have extreme insomnia, extreme emotional swings. I don't think people initially knew that anything was going on, but my wife sure did. And it was within short order that my wife and I were embroiled in a divorce proceeding. I didn't want to be married anymore. I just wanted to get away. The heck with everybody, the heck with everything. I need to just go. And so she had her people and I had my people by means of attorneys. And we got into this legal, ridiculous people that are supposed to love each other. We started this dance of that you don't want to be in with somebody you love. And so the universe has a way of uh, intervening, and it did. And unfortunately, my mother-in-law, while visiting a friend, slipped and fell and broke her hip and broke her shoulder. She was in her 90s. And so my wife had to separate from me. We were living in Florida at the time and go to Virginia to take care of her mom. She wanted nothing to do with me, right? So here I am alone, feeling sorry for myself, self-pity, wallowing in the mire at Christmas time of all things. And this time of year, 2013 or 2015. And anyhow, so I started to realize that I didn't want a divorce. It didn't make any sense. My wife was fully committed to that. I had been, but something turned in me. And so what I did is I jumped in my vehicle and I drove all the way to Virginia from Florida. I spent the night at a hotel the night before, knocked on her mother's house, her childhood home, and she was shocked to see me. Needless to say, she might have been even scared, thinking, what the hell is this guy doing? So I told her straight up that I was sorry about her mom and her, we've been together 40 years, right? And I didn't want a divorce. And what ended up really happening was she said, okay, I'll deal with that later. And I didn't want to be selfish. And so I turned right back around the day later and drove back. But I knew that there was at least hope for us, right? But I also knew, Jeremy, that I needed to get help for myself. Something was going on. And so I reached out, asked a few questions, and I got myself into cognitive behavioral therapy with a really skilled technician. She was awesome. And I started that journey back of figuring out how to deal with the traumatic brain injury, which ended up being plant medicines. The proverbial pills made me suicidal. But there's something that we did that really turned it around. So I get into cognitive behavioral therapy. And very early on, I learned that I'm not alone. I learned very quickly that I need to go inside rather than blame or have shame or guilt everybody outside of myself. And I need to deal with these issues, the childhood violation, in order to move my life forward. And it was a few months later that she was smiling at me when I went in for one of my sessions. And I'm like, Cheryl, is everything okay? Have I done something wrong? And she says to me, no, you make me smile, John. I'm a professional. I've been doing this a long time, but I love it when my clients, my patients, people who want to heal actually want to heal and they do the tough work. And that made me feel really good. But I guess it was prior to that with the insomnia. I told her, she said, what's bugging you? I said, my insomnia, I can't sleep. My mind's racing and yada, yada, yada. I guess it's a symptom of TBI. And she said, look, do me a favor. So I would find myself, Jeremy, getting up. For people listening, you might be able to relate to this. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, you get up, you turn on every light in the house or the home or wherever you are, and you just pace. Sometimes it's frantic, sometimes, mostly it's frantic. And so she told me next time that happens, get up and rather than turn on every light in the house, just go directly to the bathroom, turn on the light, walk up to the mirror and say to that person in the mirror, hey, I love you. So I did that night, 1:15, whatever it was, Jeremy. I can't remember the exact time, but I get up. I'm actually looking around. There's nobody there. I'm all alone because I had never said this to myself before. And I went in, flicked on the light. Hey, I love you. And then bam, the light's off. I go back to bed and it's like, holy cow. So as this went on, every night insomnia, every night John looking at himself in the mirror, I was starting to develop a rapport with myself. Hey, John, what happened to you was not your fault. You're a great person. Forgive yourself. Love yourself. So that's what I started to do, Jeremy. It was like a reinforcement of things that I had never said to myself because I didn't believe them. When you're raped, you think nobody loves you. How could God let this happen? Why do people do that to people? Where did that kid learn how to do that? I'm thinking about collecting bugs and starting fires, and this is happening, right? So children, boys and girls, and even young adults get exposed to things that they needn't be. And the thing about the sexual part of it is that sex, let's don't lie, sex feels good. It's an intimate connection between two human beings. That kind of sex is a little bit off kilter. But it's hard to break the intimacy or the thoughts of stuff like that. So you're constantly thinking about um, sex. And just imagine that if we'd never get anything done if human beings, if that's all they thought about, and we look at how rampant some of this stuff is, it's just anyhow, human beings, we talked about this earlier, Jeremy. Human beings are social creatures. We're not online constructs. We need to build authenticity and honesty and integrity with each other. And we're using electronic devices now, but we're having open and honest conversation. So there are ways to navigate the digital world and feel human again. But people in general, and I'm saying this strictly rhetorical, people are angry, they're divided, they don't trust anybody. And the digital world is easy. It can be a bot, it can be somebody with multiple profiles. We don't even know who we're talking to anymore. And that makes people uneasy because without trust, we can never move forward with anything as human beings. The human condition is going to continue to spiral out of control and it's not sustainable. So I don't know if I answered your question, but thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Well, thank you for sharing so openly as well. It's quite interesting. Could you just go into the kind of brain trauma that you suffered? What was it, John?
Well, I didn't know what it was at first. It was a slight concussion, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
immediately I could barely put three sentences
yeah,
together
yeah,
without jumping on to the next one. But it was the insomnia, it was the lack of coherent thinking, it
yeah,
was the mood swings, it was anger out of control. I went into that machine, that they slide you in, chicka, 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 45 minutes, MRIs and all this. And then what they found was damaged portions in my brain from the impact. And what was interesting too is they found a deep injury. And they even asked me, did you remember any kind of a head bump early in your life? And I think I might have had an accident on a bike. I was always on a bike and I remember not having a helmet on. And I remember crashing into a chain link fence and landing on the sidewalk, pirouetting and cartwheeling and bam, it could have been that, who knows? But the drugs that they gave me, the pharmaceutical prescriptions that they gave me made my symptoms worse and I became suicidal. And it wasn't working for me. And now I'd learned it was not the right thing to do, but I went cold turkey on all those pills they were giving me. And I searched out, the universe brought to me a shaman by every sense of the word. And they, what happens when you're traumatized? And it's been said that up to 75% of all of us have experienced at least one trauma, but there's like 40% that have been, have experienced multiple traumas. So we have a trauma-rich environment, right? And what the ancients healers used to believe is that when we're traumatized, you could lose a dream job and it can give you trauma. Everybody's different. But your soul, that part of you that makes you you, gets separated somehow from the physical part of you. And a lifetime is spent with your spirit trying to find your body again. So what these ancient people used to do is they would work with plant medicine, things that are naturally found in the environment, and they would go through ceremonial activities to help you find that alliance again. And so I found a guy who was deep into the spirit molecule. And I had interviewed Dr. Rick Strausman on an earlier podcast show about the spirit molecule, DMT, which is found in a certain vine in South America, but it's also found in the human organism, in your little gland in your brain. It's a pineal gland. And Pregnant women giving birth will sometimes produce DMT, so it's naturally occurring. And also when human beings die, sometimes DMT is created by the human organism during that journey into a different frequency or a different dimension, if you will. And so I had 3 sessions with DMT in a controlled environment. And what I saw, and I'm not a druggie by any sense of the imagination, what I saw in those episodes was something that's very hard to describe. And it kind of brought things back into play. So cognitive behavioral therapy, the use of plant medicines, and it's an ongoing thing, Jeremy. We never give up on ourselves. Healing is a lifelong journey because we learn, and there's a saying I just came up, think about this. Here's my definition of all knowing, right? When you know, and that's all you need to know. That's my definition. And so human beings are amazing. We have this brain, which is like the massive supercomputer, and it's constantly evaluating the environment that it's in. We are learners, quick learners. Some people are slower than others. I'm a little bit stubborn, so it took me a while. But my dad exercised corporal punishment on a consistent basis. But we all learn differently, and we're all different. But also learned in that journey is that we're not alone. Every single one of us, bar none, has value. And when you can actually go inside, I mean introspect and determine, because you know inherently what your value is, what your skills are. Not everybody can be the same. And stop comparing yourself to others. You can actually become the human being that you were meant to be. And during that journey, I came up with a philosophy. I call it the human galaxy theory. This might be good. This is probably good for the listeners, but I came up with 3 types of galaxies. I didn't create them except for the last one. And the first galaxy is a black hole galaxy. We know about black holes. They absorb even light. They absorb energy from around them. If a star gets too close, it gets swallowed up, right? But in a human being, the black hole galaxy human just wallows in guilt and in shame and in blame. And we know these people. I've been a black hole galaxy person before. They're the type of person when you shake their hand, they suck the energy right out of you. They walk into a room, the balloon just deflates and woo, goes away. There's a lot of black hole people out there that are just stuck. And it's a vicious cycle. It's a low frequency. Usually they're angry. And they're just not healthy human beings. Sorry, they're just not. And so there's an emotional state that you have to reach and you have to exercise to get to the next type of galaxy. And that emotional state is called courage. It takes real courage to want to change your life and to want to finally realize that it's you that's consciously and subconsciously creating the environment around you. And that next galaxy human is the spiral galaxy. Go online, look it up. Look up spiral galaxy. They're beautiful. They have a core energy source and they've got these beautiful arms. And the universe is full of them, more black holes than these, but they're spiraling, they're interacting with each other. So a spiral galaxy human being is operating in a emotional frequency of courage, which is better than anger and shame and blame and guilt. And we're interacting with the world. We're learning, we're talking to other human beings, we're meeting people, new experiences, and we're actually committed and resilient to want to be something more than a black hole person. Okay, so the universe is beautiful. Look at it. I mean, you can even, it's just phenomenal. Well, the last type of galaxy person, human being, is what I call the contributory galaxy human. And a contributory galaxy human is one that gives back. They're contributing to the universe. They've learned some pretty tough lessons, overcome some pretty tough challenges, and they've made a conscious decision to help the universe that it resides in. And that's where we're at. So we have this black hole galaxy human person, and then we have these spiral galaxies spiraling everywhere, full of vim and vigor. And then we have the contributory galaxies, the sages, if you will, the philosophers of our time. And philosophers and sages used to be respected. I see you have some gray hair there, Jeremy. You're a sage, and it's awesome because you're an electronic sage, which you're allowing people to tell their stories electronically and video way too. And so that's kind of how, and as you become more aware, when you know, and it's kind of frightening how many black hole people there are out there. But if we as leaders can lead by example, and we talked about love, not the creepy kind, but the kind that emanates directly from our hearts, which brings up another subject, which will blow you away. But then we can actually move the needle forward for a more sustainable and safer world. But let me share that with you real quick. I think this is important, and this is not woo-woo. This is reality. We hear about and we see these things, crystals, right? I don't know if it's coming into focus, but I got a beautiful
got it.
Quartz crystal, and in the middle or at the bottom of that crystal is a red spot, right? Well, the red spot, if we were to take a radioisotope and look at it and determine what that substance is, what we would find is it's iron. We would look on the periodic chart and we would find iron. Okay, so what? There's iron in that crystal. Well, fusion of the sun and what creates light, iron is involved in that process. If we were to go to the sun and we would find iron, the same thing in this crystal that's on the sun. But even more importantly, if we were to take blood, draw blood from any of us, we would find iron. That's what gives blood its color, is iron. There'd be iron. Think about that. There's iron in the sun. There's iron in a crystal that's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years old. And there's iron pumping in your blood. Okay, big deal. What that tells me as a critically thinking person, an intuitive, if you will, is that there's parts of us in this universe and each other that's the same. So if we're working to separate ourselves from those who are the same, maybe not in skill sets, but certainly in biology, organic or chemistry, then we're not doing anything to help ourselves or the global community at large. And I think innately we all want to help somehow. We love our families. We love our communities. We love our countries. We love whatever we love, but we don't find ourselves loving on ourselves as much. So that it all starts with that too. Self-love, self-forgiveness. And I know we're talking about a lot of stuff. You might even get hate mail. I hope not. But anyhow, it's all about the love, So think about that for a hot minute. Anyhow, thank you. I don't know if I answered anything correctly, but yeah.
You answered as you, John, and there's a lot to unpack there, but there's a few things that have really come out, and I've got another question to ask you, which may be unfair, but I'm going to come back to it in a second. But I think the pivotal moment that I'm identifying here is somewhere between that second trauma of the car accident, then your decision to go down the dual route of the cognitive behavioral therapy and the shamanic kind of route to try and find yourselves, which is not there are other men who would go and hide, go in our caves, as it's called, I suppose, sometimes, but you did that, and you and it took years, yes, to do so, but that appears to be a really pivotal moment for you. And that what I really like is that whole understanding that you were disconnected from yourself and getting to know yourself again and developing rapport in the mirror again was the start of a journey for you. But I want to go back to your wife and just ask her, I hope this isn't an unfair question, because you were on the route to divorce. You drove up to Virginia. That was the start of dialogue, etc., etc. But your wife clearly saw that you were making some changes and some decision changes. So if I were to ask your wife, explain to me what it was like with the black hole John versus the John now, what would she tell me?
Great question. I just want to, there's a caveat here, and it kind of leads into that. I got a Christmas card that Christmas because I went to drive up there like a week before the holiday. And I haven't shared this with too many people, but the card inside said basically, I've decided that I'd like to stay with you, that I have seen a change in you and we'll work on it. But for right now, I've got to take care of my mom, right? And when I got that card, it was late in the afternoon, and I dropped to my knees and I cried like a baby. And nobody saw me. And I couldn't believe it. For the first time in my life, I feel like one of the hardest challenges I had just overcome. And then this leads into how I probably was on many occasions. It was the first example that I had a chance, right? It's something better than what I'd lived. She would say that John was quick to anger. John wanted things his way, normally 99.99% of the time. So as you might even say that I was a big brat. She never called me that, but I'm looking back on it now. So, I was probably selfish. I was probably dishonest at times, because I didn't want to be challenged. I might go buy a book and hide it from her and then, or an album or whatever, months later I've had that, which was a complete lie. So I was dishonest, angry, dishonest, and selfish would be my three best guesses. But one thing that I've helped her see, because she always said this, that a skunk can't change its coat. Skunk's always a skunk, or a man is always a man. He's going to cheat on you sometime, right? And what I proved, I think, what I was able for her to see in this whole journey, which began in 2013, 15, 14, was that people can change. So I went from being angry most of the time. I get angry still, somebody pulls in front of me and I'm like, you're going to do that? Holy cow. You're going to pull in front of me and wanting to get up next to him and flip him off or something. I don't do that anymore. But that urge, comes up and I just take a deep breath and I go, holy cow, maybe his wife's pregnant. I don't know. But we're WIPs. We're work in progress all the time. You can always improve yourself, but it takes effort, and it takes belief and commitment, and it takes you figuring it out. Nobody else is going to do it for you. I can give you tips. Jeremy can share tips on how he got to where he's at, but it doesn't mean you're going to get there. What works, and think about this one for a second. I went through all the self-help book stuff, right? Probably the largest section in any bookstore you visit is the self-help section. And they're all great, and I found myself buying self-help books, throughout the years of my life. And I'd start them out, in a good, positive way. And then, 3 months later, they didn't work or something didn't work. And I'd blame myself, or I'd say that guy or that woman is full of it. That program doesn't work. Well, my advice is there comes a point where you have to put the books away and you have to make a firm commitment to do it on your own. All those people that write the self-help books are incredible human beings, contributory galaxy people. And so what if they want to make some money selling a book? They went through a lot to get there. So don't knock them for that, but make your own program. And I say, take what works for you. If you have 6 popular books, Napoleon Hill and some others, Brené Brown, and if you have these books, take what works for you, because they're different from you. So that's another thing that an extension of the question, I guess, is I took what worked for me. My wife saw a change, and here I am, still married, more than 10 years later, and happier and blessed. I got guys like you asking me to be on their show, so I've done at least one thing right, and thank you for that opportunity, Jeremy.
Well, it it's just such a pleasure to hear the journey, and we're going to go deeper into some of this. And then, so I want to come back. So I've got words: anger, controlling, dishonesty. There's a lot there. So if I were to ask your wife now to give me three words to describe you, the new you, let's say the new John, what words would you choose?
More relaxed. His energy has come back. The guy I fell in love with is here again, and he's authentic. He's living his life, and that's the guy I fell in love with. And then along the way, it got messed up. But that's probably what she would say. And I think she would say he's fun. He's fun to be around again, I love a good time, and those who know me, they know that I love life. I really do. And I love energy and people that are doing things that are positive and yeah.
Hey, there's a lot to be said though for why that is and why you love life so much now with the journey that you've been on. It's not surprising to me there, but more loving, more energy, more relaxed. It's like it's great. It must feel like a million miles away from where it was, in those darker days for both you and your wife, I guess. And it just goes to show that for all of us, we're learning something every day, right?
Yes, sir. And I love what you said, learning, because it's one of our hashtags with a project that we're working on now. But we can always learn. And it's when you cut off that learning, when that open-mindedness for more knowledge gets shut off, that not so good things can happen. As long as you're learning. And when we look at people, this huge global puzzle, everybody's at peace and they have a right to be here. Some are more angry and violent than others, and some are more happy and friendlier than others. And there's a reason for all that. And as long as we can keep that in mind, it allows us at least an opportunity to build some kind of relationship.
So before we're moving into now something that I'm equally interested in, which is your neo-masculinity movement that you've set up. And before we get to that, I've got a question which sort of almost links your journey to that in some ways for those that are tuning in, because there are a lot of men, and we know them out there, that just aren't comfortable in dealing with those deep emotions inside, going on a journey of self-discovery, embracing the kind of therapeutic roads that you went down as well. So are there two or three lessons that other men who haven't been so open can learn from based on based on your journey so that they can let go of some of that long held trauma or things that are holding them back?
I think there are, our gender, has, and so does the feminine gender, the female gender. We have some tough challenges, and men are raised with this bravado and we got to be the strong one, and Neanderthal. And yeah, violence, a truly authentic masculine man, and we'll get into masculinity. Violence is the last resort. You don't have to be violent. You don't have to be all full of this bravado, which is really fear, some sort of fear. We don't have to be that guy. We can be just as strong, just as courageous and brave, but without all that violence. And we can be violent, and we'll get into toxicity, which prompted this initiative that we're on. We can get into that if we have to. But we did a deep dive on genders and vintage gender roles. We're not talking about identity. That's something totally different. We're talking about traditional historical gender roles. And a man is his primary purpose in life is to protect his family All right. We know about family and his loved ones from harm, from threats. You know, a million years ago, it was saber-toothed tigers and mastodons, right? And we're sitting in a cave and the fire's going and we hear a noise. The guys grab the spears. Sorry, ladies. Unless there's no men around, then the ladies grab the spears, and they're quite capable of protecting their families. We've heard the lioness, but we grab the spears. You and me, Jeremy, we go out, we check it out, and we come back. That's how it was done traditionally for eons. The men were the primary protectors of the family, the community, the enclave. Some men took it a little bit too far, but anyhow, so time goes on, the threats have shifted. Now we have informational threats, basically in the form of unreliable information. And I don't want to jump ahead, but about 5 years ago, we started hearing, all of us did, the word toxic next to the word masculinity. And it wasn't making sense. You know, masculinity is toxic. So we went on one of the very popular search engines and we looked up masculinity, and this thing, NeoMasculinity, started popping up, right? NeoMasculinity. A man cannot be masculine, this is the inference, unless he embraces changing social norms. Sounds good on face, but the question we asked is, what happens if that changing social norm is not based on facts or the truth or reality? What you're basically saying is a man cannot be masculine unless he lies. And men want to be integral. We don't want to lie. We want to be that guy that people go to for that integrity. And so why would that narrative be put out there so much? Now think about the name of our company, NeoMasculinity not a .com, it's a .solutions. It's kind of working subversively in and around the narrative of toxic masculinity. But, well, you know, you divide the family, you disempower vintage gender roles, you disrupt societies, and you destroy cultures. And what do you have? You have a world that's easy to manipulate. You have a lot of angry people, and when we're operating in anger and toxicity, we can't critically think or even intuitively think for ourselves anymore. Logic and reason gets thrown out the door, and common sense, right? What is that? So we developed that company, this company, NeoMasculinity Solutions, because the future of our planet depends on whether or not our children can discern facts from fiction, truth from lies, reality from fantasies. If we don't, as adults, men and women, we're not exclusive of women. If we do not teach our children how to discern those things, then we have failed as adults. And we don't want to fail. And so if we can, so think of our hashtags, Jeremy. Hashtag family. Hashtag education. And hashtag truth. So I have a team. We have an AI guy in Ireland. I have a really hot, and I mean hot, female innovator from South Africa originally. She's in the States. We have a couple of veterans, men and women behind the scenes, who are working hard to develop tools to educate the people that join our network. And when I say tools, we're working on we have a business called the Brainary, which is part of it. The Brainary, like a granary. We train brains, not grains. And we're developing curricula for elementary level, middle school, high school, and college. The college course is almost done. We have a mini course called Brain Freeze, Breaking the Ice on Critical Thinking. It's awesome. If you want to visit the website, we can talk, get it, and watch it with your kids, your family. We also have 4 master classes, which are in development, one on leadership, one on military transition, one on NeoMasculinity Solutions, and one on healing from trauma. And then we also have the Sentinel Handbook. It's a small 30-page handbook. It's written in 9 languages. It's in PDF now, but we're formatting it for books. That's a primer, if you will, on intuition and critical thinking, logic, reason, and common sense, and what unreliable information does. And most people don't know this, but well, the people that are online do. We're being bombarded 24/7, 365 days a year with information, most of which is unreliable. There's truthful information out there, and that's what we strive to find. But you also have misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, noisy information, which is social media. If you're getting your news on social media, think twice. And then now we have AI information. You and me could become AI. This could be AI right now. It's not, but it could be. So what we hope to do and what we are doing is to reignite intuition. It's like this, Jeremy. If I told you something, right, just because I'm telling you and the hair on the back of your neck goes up, right? You think I'm this great influencer, but I'm telling you something that's complete rubbish, but you go ahead and you go with me. You've been compromised. Jeremy, you should say, John, you're bonkers, brother. You're crazy. There's no way that's true. So we're trying to reignite that intuition again, and there are ways to do it. Goosebumps is one. The hairs on the back of your neck is another, but also critical thinking and then logic and reason. There used to be a time when philosophers were revered because those guys were always trying to figure out the meaning of life and what is truth. And then we laughed about it before, but common sense. So that's why we're at with that project. See what coffee does to me? And I didn't even get into Task Force Zen. Task Force Zen, yeah, that is a global, my brother, I'm telling you, it is a global platform that will heal the planet on an entirely holistic level with all these healing modalities, and we will create massive amounts of wealth for the businesses that do that and the individuals and the companies, plus for the company itself. But we got to do what we're doing now first.
Well, actually going back to something that you said, this sort of segue between what we were talking about before and often men having a fear of being open and kind of dealing with that. In the metaphor of your sort of human galaxy theory, fear is the other side of the courage coin, probably. So if you just give up to your fear, you're going to go back to that black hole place pretty quickly. But if you embrace the courage, that's you're traveling to the spiral galaxy. And I kind of understand that, but there's so many immobilized men, and it's not getting any better because of this. You're right, it's a post-truth era that we're in. It's so unreliable, and yet it's like I'd like to kind of put to the test in terms of what you're saying is that we have to have voices which are as strong as populist, and I don't use toxic masculinity, by the way. I use toxic machismo because I
love
think
you,
it's
man.
different.
See, you're on to it.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. So, and what we need are people like you that call out people like Aidan Ross, Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, the younger men that are being influenced. So, in terms of the neo-masculinity movement and solutions that you have in place, how do you call them out as much as, re-educate the people that are under your wing so that there is almost that balancing truth out there about what makes a modern man or, what makes a sensible man?
No, that's a great question, Jeremy, and that's a great way of putting it. And here's a thing that I believe on that. They're going to call themselves out. I believe that the universe has its own set of rules, right? And that some people might say it's karma or you get what you give and all this, right? I don't know. I don't, it is my job and it's not my job to call them out. They're going to call themselves out. And there's no way that if you were to look at it, first of all, bravery and courage and all that takes practice to be in that space where you're not using violence and machismo. It takes real being in control of your emotional state. So all I can say to those guys, God bless them. And they're going to call themselves out. The universe works like that. And here's the sad part, or maybe the good part. You know, we've heard of yin and yang, right? We've heard of balance. And there's got to be a balance. We can't have nonviolent, loving men who are quite capable of violence unless we have the machismo violent men. You know, we got to have those guys in the network with us. We have to. It's the way the universe works, and it's not my universe, but I'm in it. So I believe that there's a constant flux and a constant flow and a constant transition from guys like that into guys like us. And then, but I just think it's a continuous process. Those guys actually are pretty funny. You know, I look at it, I go, dudes, you don't have to act that way. And in fact, you'll look much more impressive and people will like you more if you act this way. And if you search your soul, chances are you don't have to do it with everybody around. Do it look in the mirror. If you search your soul, Andrew Tate, you might say, man, those guys are on to something. And last time I checked, I'm a guy. Maybe I can be friendly. Remember the saying, you can get more flies with honey than you can with vinegar? That's how we do it. We keep being guys that speak honey. Honey flows from our lips. Honey drips from our fingertips. And what a sweet way to live your life. But we haven't talked about poetry, but and I just said a little poem there, but if we go about being violent and full of all this bravado, the universe is going to bring that to us. And one thing that I learned by watching the video series Planet Earth, you might have seen that video. It's awesome. The one thing that I walked away from in that video was there's always something bigger than you that can eat you. Whether you're a protozoa or a machismo type of guy, somebody's going to come along and knock you off your perch or gobble you up, right? So imagine with the honey flowing, what that life could be like. You're going to attract more people that way than you are being a complete idiot. And I'm not calling those guys idiots, but if the shoe fits, right? Anyhow, I don't know if that answered your question, but the universe will figure it out for us. And I just wish those guys the best, and I wish them good luck because
well said.
We're going to do it our way.
I like it. I like it. I love that honey in the vinegar. Like pour all that honey, and it will dilute that vinegar, and they will dilute themselves because they'll go out of date real quick, right? Won't they? And I'm
true. Yeah.
For me, it's kind of interesting because of your own personal journey. You've learned to come through that. You've seen that. You've seen the vinegar side. You've seen the honey side, presumably as well. You've seen both sides of that as part of that learning journey. And there are men and women listening to this podcast that can learn a lot from what you have been through. If you were to distill this entire journey that you've been through, from trauma to losing yourself, to finding yourself, to saving your marriage, to being a successful business person, for starting the NeoMasculinity Solutions and having the network that you've got, what are the 3 key pieces of advice that we can take away that would really help us now?
Oh, great question. Thanks, Jeremy. You're not alone. Get a grip on yourself. Have a handle on your emotional state and get out there and live your life in a positive way. Because we have that choice. And every morning we get up, Jeremy, I tell you, man, it's not easy every day. It takes work. But some days I get up and I go, oh my God, what is going to happen today? And then I just say, you know what? Something good's going to happen. And if you place that in your brain, the minute you put your feet onto the floor, what's going to happen as you start to do this? And when something bad happens, you just go, you brush it off and you pick yourself up and you keep going. So keep going. That's number 4. You asked for 3, I gave you 4.
Great. I love that. I always like getting a bonus though on that. So you're not alone. You have to get a grip of yourself and you have to find yourself. I really get that too. Get out, live your best life, be positive and keep going. Build that positive momentum behind it. Beautiful words, John. And beautiful words are also in poetry, and you've mentioned poetry a couple of times now. So before we end, I'd like to come back about and just sort of understand your love of poetry and what you find in yourself and in others through poetry.
Well, thanks for the question and the opportunity. But I and the other poets know this and writers, I had no way to deal with the questions I had as a young fella, right? So I found myself in poetry, which I really never shared. Occasionally, I'd be a storyteller at recess time in grade school. That the kids always wanted me to tell a story, and it was always murder or mystery, right? But they loved it, and so I became this consummate storyteller at a very young age. And I didn't know it at the time, but I know it kind of now. Thank you, teachers, Mrs. Tidwell, Mrs. Warwick. They're gone now, but boy, they gave me that chance. And and then I wrote poems and poems and poems and poems and thousands of them. And I write under a couple of pen names. One of them, and I haven't really shared this with too many people, but one of them is Mr. Truth, and the other one is Johnny Angel. Jonny, Johnny Angel. And I started writing a lot of the poetries on these poetry websites, and I'm on one that I really like. It's called Hello Poetry. And a lot of the poems were character poems. What I do is I interweave some political. I got a book called Freedom Punch. That's a whole different thing. But I tried to take snippets of my own journey and create character poems, trying to visualize how that particular character might think, And so human beings are amazing creatures. And when they give themselves credit and when they find themselves, Jeremy, every single human being has the capacity to change their world and the world around him for the better. Every single person. They just have to believe it. And they have to have leaders out there like yourself and like me and others who are entrepreneurs, I guess, or writers or poets to help them along the way. They have to have loving parents. Why do you want to teach your kids hate when you could teach them love? That's a good question.
It is a great question, and it's great that one thing that resonates there is you're using poetry to unfurl a character and where they might go and where they might be in whatever genre of poetry that you're looking at. So I've sadly we've come to the end of our podcast, but I would like to ask you this. Where first it's a two-part. So the first bit is where do our listeners or those who are watching on YouTube find Mr. Truth and Johnny Angel poems?
Well, you can go to hellopoetry.com. It's out there. It's great. In fact, I can share a poem that I wrote just this morning, real quickly. I know times
Please,
it's called
do.
It's called Devil's Breath. Think about this.
So that's
And I don't mean
about,
to be a downer, but this is dealing still.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, you
this is on
mentioned this,
Hello
yeah.
Poetry.
Yeah.
Devil's breath. When the devil's when the devil's so close, you can smell its breath. You know you're screwed. That's how child rape feels. I felt that once, only once. It was enough to know I didn't like it. I hate that smell. That's a short one. But that's, still here at 66 years old, writing about stuff that happened 50 plus years ago. So we're always a work in progress and we're always dealing with that. But, you can visit www.neomasculinity.com. No, I'm sorry. See, I got myself in a different place. Solutions.
Yeah.
Because we are the solution to all of these threats. I also have a personal website, johntkrotec.com, which is the poetic human, and it's more than just poetry.
Mm.
And watch for Task Force Zen. Task Force Zen, it will be a global healing, holistic healing project that will heal the planet in a way that it's never been healed before. So that's coming next year. But right now, NeoMasculinity Solutions. Jeremy, I thank you. Every time that I am able to share, it just gets better. So you, Mr. Jeremy, have been part of my healing process because you allow me the opportunity to come clean and to share and to be the authentic person that I desire to be. Thank you.
Well, it's been a real pleasure to hear your words, but particularly that poem at the end there, because there are men out there and women out there and people who have been through trauma like that and abuse like that. I include myself in that too. Those words resonate, and the journey resonates too. And I think those of us that have come through that, accepted that in a way, and learned to love ourselves again and to get through that, can be inspired to do great things. And I do hope you come back and talk to us about Task Force Zen next year once you've got it under your belt. We'd love to hear about it, John.
And I'd love to come back, and thank you for that. And my heart goes out to you as well, brother. You're in the fight with us, and it means a lot to know that you're across the pond, and I know that there's other real men over there who are leading the charge, who are on the tip of the spear, and you are. And thank you to your audience. God bless each and every one of you. If you're going through something, hopefully that Jeremy and I were able to impart some wisdom, and remember those things, and you're going to be okay.
Great. Well, John T. Krotec, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Jeremy. We'll see you again. Have a Merry Christmas.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blain. Please like, comment, and support us on your favourite platform, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch as well as listen to each episode.